I am Brian Champion, the Political Science and World Politics librarian and coordinator of library lectures. We welcome students, colleagues, and invited guests here today to our House of Learning lecture with Professor John W. Welch as our featured speaker. His address for us today is entitled, "The Stories Behind the Two Roman Bronze Plates." As you may have seen as you entered the library today, the plates about which Professor Welch will speak are on an exhibit on the third floor. The library sponsors two main lectures and lecture series, the House of Learning Lecture Series and the Alice Louise Reynolds Women in Scholarship Lecture. Through these lectures, the library brings together scholars and students to engage in a civil discussion of ideas, and in so doing, the library contributes to building a learned community which fosters the faithful life of the mind. The House of Learning Lecture Series title is taken from the 88th section of the Doctrine and Covenants, verse 119, where the Lord instructs the saints to prepare every needful thing, even a house of learning. Because the library is the campus repository for the literature of all academic disciplines and scholarship, the library is well positioned to be considered BYU's House of Learning. The Harold B. Lee Library takes seriously its campus role as the intellectual heart of inquiry and knowledge and is honored to provide this House of Learning lecture today. To introduce Professor Welch, please welcome Randy J. Olson, the University Librarian and Director of the Harold B. Lee Library.
Thank you, Brian. It's my great pleasure today to welcome a friend of the library and a friend of Brigham Young University, Dr. John W. Welch, to deliver our lecture and to really introduce the exhibit which we'll see following this lecture. Dr. Welch received a BA in History and simultaneously completed an MA in Latin and Greek in 1970, all here at Brigham Young University. He then spent 2 years studying Greek philosophy at Oxford University at St. Edmund Hall before entering Duke Law School, from which he received his Juris Doctorate in 1975. He is the Robert K. Thomas Professor of Law at the J. Reuben Clark Law School, where he teaches tax classes and also courses on law in the ancient Near East and Old and New Testaments, and the Book of Mormon as well, plus a seminar on Joseph Smith and the law. He is the author of many books and articles, and some of his many editing experiences include working on several volumes in the collected works of Hugh Nibley, as one of the editors of Macmillan's monumental Encyclopedia of Mormonism, and currently is the editor-in-chief of BYU Studies. In 1979, he was the founder of the Foundation for Ancient Research in Mormon Studies, and was the director of special projects in the BYU Religious Studies Center from 1986 to 1988. He has served twice as a bishop and also as a counselor in the BYU 14th Stake Presidency. He is married to Jeannie Sutton. They have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Brothers and sisters, it is with great warmth and personal friendship that we welcome Jack Welch to the library.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you all for being here today. This is certainly a grand and fortunate occasion for me and for all of us, a long-awaited celebration as we open this exhibit. It has been a real honor for me to work with Randy Olson and the Harold B. Lee Library. Making a contribution to this library means a great deal to my wife Jeannie and to me. Especially since it was 39 years ago this week that we met in the Harold B. Lee Library, which was then the J. Reuben Clark Library. Well, the rest of our story, as they say, is academic. In my presentation today, I would like to introduce this wonderful exhibit to you and explain somewhat why we have included what we have in the display to help you interpret and appreciate these 2 extraordinary ancient bronze Roman military tablets. They are the stars today. I want to begin my remarks by sincerely thanking many people who have made this experience possible. In a few minutes, we will go up to the brand new premier exhibit space for an official opening. The opening of this display of BYU's 2 recently acquired ancient Roman bronze plates has been made possible by the superb skills and dedication and academic efforts of many people. I thank them all, and hopefully not inadvertently overlooking any of them, let me tell you a little bit about some of these people. They include Professor John F. Hall, Professor of Classical Languages and Ancient History at BYU, and my colleague as Special Roman Curator for this exhibit, whose first ever translation into English of the technical military Latin that appears on these plates you can read in the display, and you also have on the back page of the handout that you've received today. I have to say that John and I have done a lot of things together over the years. We were here at BYU as undergraduates. I began as a pre-law major and switched to classics. I talked John out of going into law and into classics. I'm now a law professor, and he's in the classics department. We still can't figure out who's doing what. Michael DeReyes and Garrett Hart also contributed to the exhibit. Michael is a research professor in the Department of Geological Sciences at BYU, and Garrett, a former student at BYU, is a research scientist in the Geoanalytical Library at Washington State University. Their remarkable metallurgical analyses using a minute flake off of one of these plates locates the plates in their ancient mining and smelting contexts, and whose data is graphically displayed in the exhibit. We thank antiquities dealer and collector David Swingler for many things, for sharing freely of his knowledge and enthusiasm, for his facsimiles, and for his fortuitous meeting with Dr. Jerome Eisenberg, head of the Royal Athena Galleries in London and New York, from whom we acquired these plates. Dr. Eisenberg wanted to see these plates acquired by an educational institution where they could be enjoyed by the public. And he wanted that enough that he and his financial partner, Michael Bianco, were willing to participate with our acquisition group by donating a nice share of these plates to BYU. An expression of greatest appreciation goes to them, and also to Frank and Marcia McAllister, Mark and Laura Willis, Stuart and Julie Grow, Bill and Patricia Child, who joined with me and my wife Jeannie as the acquisition group that purchased and donated these rare and valuable plates. If any of the people that I've mentioned so far are here, I'd like to invite them to stand and have you acknowledge them with a round of applause. Would you please? You can read more about these plates in the gallery guide that you will get as you leave this lecture, and also in depth in 2 articles that appeared in last fall's issue of BYU Studies, Volume 45, Number 2, which can be acquired here in the Special Collections area of the library in the BYU bookstore or from BYU Studies. BYU Studies, now a part of the Neal A. Maxwell Institute for Religious Scholarship at BYU, is proud to be a co-sponsor of this exhibit with the Harold B. Lee Library. Those at BYU Studies who deserve special recognition include my editorial assistant and co-author, Kelsey Draper Lambert, whose father is here with us today, editors Jenny Hurlbut and Roger Terry, who worked on those articles, and our graphic designer, Robert Spencer. Now, in that issue of BYU Studies, you will see Robert's handiwork, especially in the 4 color plates, no pun intended, the color pictures of the plates, which are the exact size of the actual plates on display. I think they are the best images ever published of any ancient Roman bronze plates. We also thank many people here at the Lee Library who have collaborated and made this exhibit a reality. From the library administration, Randy Olson, Scott Duvall, Callie O'Connell, and Rex Carlson. In their exhibition design and installation area, Mark Polai and Sean McMurdy, with their helpers Justin Stewart, Shantae Vaughn, Eric Dalson, Amanda Cockerill. In the library's multimedia and web group, we have Michael Gee, director, with Darrett Hakes, Alan Dupre, Chris Garcia, Andy Lorimer, Wesley Avery, Aaron Monson, Ryan Farnes, and Mike Hill. In this exhibit, you will learn much. Don't miss any single detail in this installation. No effort has been spared to make this an elegant, engaging, and informative exhibition. I think you'll also find the best scholarly online reference library anywhere in the world about Roman military diplomas on the new Harold B. Lee website. Let me also briefly mention others, including members of the BYU administration, Professor Kent Brown, whose video appearance you'll recognize from his work also on Journey of Faith, David Langenbacker, an interesting bronze casting person up in West Valley, who cast for us museum replicas of these plates. Tyler Rollins and a master craftsman from Italy, Aris Zemelis, who works in Heber, who has done the marble on which one of the plates is mounted. Little did Tyler and Aris know when they were remodeling my bathroom that their marble work would have even greater application here at BYU. Louis Ballesteri of Classical Ancient Coins in Milpitas, California, helped us acquire the near mint condition coins of Trajan that you'll see on the display. Now, if any of these people that I've mentioned are here, I'd like you to stand as well and be recognized, would you please? Thank you. We are grateful to each one of you. And last but not least, I want to thank the Federal Express delivery boy who delivered to me this wooden box sitting up on the table, which was shipped from David Swingler to me. It came to me, for reasons I won't explain now, uninsured, but with the value of the plates crossed off but still legible on the shipping documents. So, thanks to an honest Federal Express employee, here's the box and the plates. Now you can imagine Stuart Grove's reaction when I called him right after the box had been delivered and said, "Stuart, I've got some brass plates in a wooden box. Want to come and see them?" He came right over. When I told him that the date on the plates reads, the day before the Ides of October, which is October 14th, which happened to be Stuart's birthday, it seemed like his contribution toward the acquisition of the plates was all meant to be. That evening, Jeannie and I just happened to be coming out of a Provo restaurant, and who should be there just coming back from his mission in Hawaii but Mark Willis, whom we hadn't seen for years. He asked the fateful question, "Do you have anything new these days?" I told him about the plates having just arrived. And again, it was more than coincidence that he just happened to be there at that moment and participated with us in making this acquisition possible. Well, to put all of this in context, let me help you understand what you will see in this beautiful display. Let's consider these plates historically, legally, functionally, typologically, and personally. But first, consider the plates themselves. As the map here in this exhibit shows, plates or fragments of the plates plates like these have been found in many locations. Our plates come from southeastern Europe in the old province of Dacia. As far as I know, this pair is the best preserved complete set of Roman plates in existence. On Wednesday night, I gave a classics professor from Texas a sneak preview of the exhibit. He was astounded. These plates are better than any he had ever seen. The metal in the plates is intrinsically valuable, and for that reason alone, few of these plates have survived from antiquity. After they had served their legal and political purposes, plates like these were typically melted down or sometimes cut into small pieces that were then used as a type of informal currency. As you will see in the exhibit, the ancients often wrote on metal plates or plaques. To illustrate this, one panel in the exhibit will take you to a small town in central Italy named Gubbio. The McAllisters will remember our long detour to Gubbio some 5 years ago. We went there to see the Iguvine bronze plates on display in the back corner of the Gubbio City Hall. There, 7 brass plates, which date to the 2nd or 3rd centuries BC, and inscribed front and back, were on display. Interestingly, they were written in one language, Umbrian, but using the letters of another language, Etruscan, an odd practice that might remind Book of Mormon readers of writing on one set of plates, writing on another set of plates in one language, but using the characters of another. In the exhibit, you will also see a picture of the copper scroll from Qumran, which comes from about the same time as our Roman plates, and also 2 small silver scrolls, showing that writing on metal was fairly widespread and used for various purposes. The Roman use of writing on metal, like these examples from the British Museum, goes back to at least the 2nd century BC. In 1 Maccabees chapter 8, we learn that the Roman Senate sent a peace treaty to Jerusalem on a bronze tablet. And 1 Maccabees chapter 14 tells that the Spartans similarly sent a bronze memorial with a copy to Simon, the high priest of Jerusalem. In 89 BC, the Romans began using bronze military diplomas to grant citizenship to cavalrymen in Spain. Their use in issuing imperial military diplomas began during the reign of the Emperor Claudius around 50 A.D. Now, LDS scholars have long been interested in writing on metal. The early writings of Hugh Nibley, who was my first semester freshman Book of Mormon teacher, aroused my interest in this subject, a topic he discussed often. As early as 1948, he wrote, after listing several examples of metal plates from Byblos, Egypt, and India, "What we want to point out here is that the knowledge and use of metal plates for the keeping of important records is beginning to emerge as a general practice throughout the ancient world. It will not be long before men forget that in Joseph Smith's day, the prophet was mocked and derided for his description of the plates more than anything else." End of quote. I also remember well the case of metal objects displayed by Paul Chessman that I saw as a student in the old Joseph Smith building in the 1960s. In our new display, you will see panels on one wall showing how metal plates were made, which copper mines the ancient ore came from, and what the Latin text on these plates says. Historically, we want you to know something about the Roman Emperor Trajan. He was a popular emperor, the one who issued the plates on display. He was quite friendly and accommodating toward Christians. You will see in the display several Trajan coins and a picture of Trajan's column celebrating his conquest of Dacia. One of these rare coins shows Trajan's monumental column on its reverse side. You will also see in the display a first-ever computer-generated frieze from Trajan's column. It's around the top of the exhibit walls. Trajan and Dacia are important here because these plates were issued by Trajan granting citizenship and retirement benefits to a soldier, Marcus Herennius Polymita, who had fought in the Dacian campaign. Now let me turn your attention to what are, for me, the most important legal features of these plates and other doubled sealed witness documents. Just as we as modern people have come to back up our computers and records and to deposit copies of deeds in land record offices, ancient people also had to find ways to back up their important documents. Several millennia ago, the Mesopotamians backed up their clay records by writing on a tablet, drying it, then wrapping the tablet with an envelope of clay and then writing the text a second time on that outer clay layer. If the outer text became damaged, the envelope could then be opened by a judge, and there inside would be a backup copy. It appears that the Israelites came up with the idea of doing the same sort of thing on parchment or papyrus scrolls. In your handout, you have a copy of the text of Jeremiah chapter 32. There we read about a real estate transaction in verses 8 to 14. Jeremiah had been prophesying that the Lord would indeed bring the Israelites, the Jews, back to Jerusalem after the destruction of Jerusalem. His nephew said, "If you really believe this, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and buy a piece of property that the family owns in the village of Anathoth, not far from Jerusalem?" Jeremiah wanted to be sure that people knew that he believed what he had prophesied. He called together a group of witnesses. He had them bring a document, the evidence of the purchase, weighed out the shekels in the scales. He then took the evidence of the purchase, and in verse 11 it says, "Both that which was sealed according to the law and custom, and that which was open," and he subscribed this evidence, had the witnesses subscribe to it, had it sealed, and then put into an earthen vessel, so that it might continue for many days. All of this was very puzzling to biblical scholars until about 80 years ago, when archaeologists began to find examples of just such documents in the Elephantine Island, on the island of Elephantine in the Nile in Egypt. On page 2 of your handout, you will see the way in which these papyrus documents are put together. They would take a piece of papyrus, write the terms of the agreement or manumission or whatever it was on the top half of the sheet. Then they would cut a slit and put 3 holes and rewrite a second copy of the text below. They could then roll down the top, fold it over, and through the 3 holes draw strings, tie, and then place wax or clay seals, and the witnesses would then place their impression on the seals to seal the document. Well, the portion that was left open was called the open portion of the text, and that which was sealed was called the sealed portion of the text. The bottom remained open for use and inspection by the parties to the transaction or who needed to know what the terms of the agreement were. The seals were placed on the outer package to be sure that the document was not tampered with. Biblical law required that such things be established in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Rabbinic law insisted on 3, as you see here. Sometimes the open part would give a full text in duplicate. Sometimes it was an abridgment. Other times the sealed part would be a summary or an abridgment. But in any case, if the open part became damaged by water or tearing or tampering, a judge would be able to break the seals, open the sealed portion, and there would be an official, accurate copy of the document to resolve the legal dispute. Also on your handout, you see a picture on page 3 of a parchment document. This happens to be a bill of divorcement that was found in Dura Europos in modern-day Syria. Notice there the slit across the document, in this case 2 holes for the sealing. You begin to get the idea how that top part was folded over. You can still see the crease in the middle, rolled down, and then sealed. In this particular document, the open part at the bottom is considerably longer than the sealed part. So the sealed part is a shorter, abridged version. They did this also on wood tablets, particularly for less permanent transactions or records. Just in 2004, Elizabeth Meyer has published through Cambridge University Press a very good book called Legitimacy and Law in the Roman World. It discusses in great detail how these doubled, witnessed, sealed tabulae gave credibility, legality, and enforcement to documents throughout the Roman Empire. Much more work remains to be done to identify exactly when and why such documents were or were not used, but typically they seem to be used for important, long-lasting purposes, such as granting citizenship, freedom, or divorce, property transactions, other things that have long-term legal significance. I wondered, as I taught my law students about Jeremiah 32 in our biblical law class, if they could do the same kind of thing on metal plates. To find an answer for this, I decided to make a stop in England on my way to a conference about ancient law that was being held at the Papyrological Institute in Leiden in the Netherlands. I had been teaching biblical law and took with me Kaufman's book on Jeremiah 32. I wanted to actually find some of these papyrus documents and see what they looked like. I stopped at the Bodleian Library at Oxford and then at the British Museum in London, hoping to find examples of what Kaufman called Doppelurkunden, but I had absolutely no luck. I found that people knew nothing about these documents, and I decided to set my research aside. I went on to Leiden. At Leiden, the conference happened to meet in the Papyrological Institute's library. We sat in the library with a square table configuration so that we were all sitting around the room next to the book-lined walls. On the final day of the 3-day conference, and by that time being quite weary, my mind began to roam, and my eyes were inextricably drawn to the spines of the intriguing books on the shelves right near me. Right above my left shoulder were a few rare archaeological reports and books about the very subject I was looking for. I dropped my plans for a day of touring and came away with copies of virtually all of the important scholarship I needed on this subject. Those materials allowed me to write my chapter in the John L. Sorensen Festschrift on double-sealed witness documents, and it was that article that caught the attention of David Swingler, who contacted me when he learned that our plates had become available through Eisenberg's Royal Athena Gallery following the death of the famous Austrian collector Axel Gutmann in 2001. And here we are. Here is side A of plate 1. Notice the beautiful patina of the natural age of this bronze plate. On side A of plate 1, you have the full text of the imperial decree. Notice at the beginning, it takes 2 lines for Trajan to give us all of his titles. It begins, Imperator Caesar, the son of divine Nerva, Trajanus, Augustus, Germanicus, Decius, Pontifex Maximus. He was a modest man. This side of this plate was cast, that is, in a flat mold that had been made from a wax prototype. Here's the back side of plate 1. Notice that it is a duplicate text, virtually identical to what you saw in the first slide. You can see on the first few lines, once again, exactly the same words, abbreviated, but Imperator Caesar and so on, that we had on the first side, with exactly the same abbreviations. But because you can only cast one side of a plate at a time, these letters were hammered with a stylus and a chisel. Now here is what I call side C. This is the obverse of plate 2. There you have the rest of the backup text. So between sides B and C, you have the complete duplicate of the full text on side A. They could write smaller in wax, and the cast side of plate 1, it took more space to do the inscribing on sides B and C. You can notice right in the middle you have the letters PR, IDUS, OCT, That's the day before the Ides of October, which I referred to earlier. Notice also in the upper right and left-hand corners the two holes. These holes would be used to connect these two plates with small brass or copper rings. And here finally is the fourth side, side D, which is the back of plate 2. Here you have the names of 7 witnesses. They are the tripartite Roman names. In the middle of this plate, you see 2 holes. These were the holes that were used for sealing these 2 plates together. And between the 2 holes, you can see an area where a box used to be, which held wax. The seals of the witnesses were then pressed into the wax, and the wax was protected so that the 2 plates could not be separated. Notice that there are 7 of these witnesses. This might call to mind Revelation chapter 5, verse 1 in the book of Revelation in the New Testament, and help you to appreciate that anew. It says, "And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book, written within, and on the backside sealed with 7 seals." John the Revelator has apparently used an image that would have been well known to his contemporary readers at exactly this same time of Trajan. In your handout, on page 5, you have the Latin transcription of the full text, and on the back, you have John Hall's translation, and let me just call to your attention the last few lines of that translation, where after all the details, we finally get down to the granting of citizenship to Marcus Herennius Palamita Barons, son of Marcus, and notice also to his son Januarius, and to his son Marcellus, and to his daughter Lucana. Notice also that this certifies that this was recorded and posted on a bronze tablet which is affixed in Rome to a wall on the back of the Temple of Minerva, built by Augustus Caesar. In the display, you will see a replica plate actually posted on a marble slab, just as our plate says that a copy of this decree was posted in Rome. This posting may bring to mind the fact that the Apostle Paul, like all Roman citizens, had his name on display in public records somewhere in Rome. Functionally, let me show you how these plates would work. I think you have a pretty good idea of it so far. We have 2 replicas of these plates on display, so you can pick them up and handle them and see how they work. Like 2 pieces of bread in a sandwich, you have the rings connecting them together. The outside is where you have the cast outer text. They open up after the seals are broken, and there you have the inner text on the inside. So these would have been sealed with wire and are very convenient and kind of fun to handle. Well, these plates have been very interesting to all people, but it has been especially exciting for me to show them to Latter-day Saints. I've shown these plates to many people in the past year, always with galvanizing results. To donors and scholars who found the plates instantly amazing as ideal specimens, to that preeminent classics scholar from the University of Texas who got a sneak preview on Wednesday. It really quite amazed him. He said as he walked out, "I'm blown away." And by seeing and handling these things, he understood things that he hadn't understood before. I've shown these plates to firesides and study groups. They have all found the plates inspirational, bringing each observer one step closer to imagining what other ancient plates were like. I allowed members of the church's Natural Resources Council, many involved with minerals and precious metals, to handle the plates. They were reduced to awe. One of them said to me, "I can't believe I'm actually holding and reading something this old." Teenagers at a stake youth conference, and you know you've got something when teenagers will pay attention, listened with rapt attention, and law students do what they always do, immediately began asking a lot of questions. Well, after a lecture about the plates to the incoming BYU honors freshmen last August, I was mobbed, and most of the students even forgot about the refreshments. So it is tempting to ask, why have these plates proved so interesting to me and to these people? Obviously, it has to do with the Book of Mormon. Latter-day Saints are instinctively interested in ancient records, especially those written on metal plates. While we must be cautious in connecting these Roman plates and the plates of Mormon, and while it is fair to wonder how does one connect the dots between 109 AD in Rome and 385 AD in the Americas, I wish to argue that these dots can be logically, responsibly, and persuasively connected because of the typological combination of at least a dozen interlacing factors. I don't want to overstate this comparison, but then again, I don't want to understate it either. I hope to apply the Goldilocks principle here, neither too hot nor too cold. Consider these points. 1. The dots between the Book of Mormon and these Roman plates happen to converge on a point in time back at around 600 BC in Jeremiah 32, in the life of Jeremiah. This was exactly the time of Nephi. From there, one line runs down from Nephi to Mormon. Another line runs from Jerusalem out to the Jewish settlement at Elephantine, later to Greek papyri in that region, and then to Rome's conquest of Egypt about 125 years before Trajan. So it's a trail that one can well imagine. Second, we can show that the use of doubled sealed witness documents was widespread for many hundreds of years. So it is a pattern of legal formality that endured over the ages. Third, we can find these texts in lots of cultures and languages. Double documents pop up in Akkadian, Hebrew, Greek, Latin. It was a standard formality for important texts that cut across cultural and language barriers. Fourth, ancient people knew how to make doubled sealed documents on different media: clay, parchment, papyrus, wood, wax, and metals. Whatever they had to write on, people found a way to back up their records, and there is no reason to believe that the Book of Mormon peoples would not have done this as well. Fifth, ancient people expected important long-term matters to be written on durable substances. This enhanced their importance and legitimacy. In our case, imperial decrees were issued on doubled plates by the Roman emperor. In Nephi's case, he wanted his records of most eternal value regarding our eternal status and everlasting covenants to be preserved as well as possible on the most durable and valuable metal available. Sixth, in both cases, special alloys appeared to have been developed for this purpose. For the Romans, it was bronze with tin and some lead isotope traces. For the Book of Mormon, we suspect that tumbaga, an alloy of gold and copper, would have been used, as it was often in ancient Mesoamerica. 7, in size. The Roman plates are 5 by 7. The Book of Mormon plates were described as being about 6 by 8 inches. This compares very closely. This would appear to reflect a practical size known by people from experience who had cast and handled such documents. 8. In thickness, the Roman plates are about 1/16 of an inch thick. This is probably a little thicker than the Book of Mormon plates would have been, which would have been able to be thinner because they were in a larger stack. 9th, the pairs of Roman plates were held together by 2 small rings in the corner, which is sufficient for 2 plates. A much larger stack of Book of Mormon plates would need to be held, as they were always described as having 3 D-shaped rings, as would then be needed. Number 10, and perhaps most of all, we have here an interior text to preserve important documents and an open text for use. In 2 Nephi 27, Nephi actually laid down the blueprint for how he wanted the plates of Mormon eventually to be constructed. He speaks in verse 11 of a sealed part, and in verse 15 of an open part, a part that would not be sealed. 11th, Nephi's statement implies some kind of sealing device. In his day, it would have been common to use cylinder or signet ring seals impressed on clay or wax. With the Roman plates, a twisted wire through those two holes was used. That works for a pair of plates, but not for a stack of plates, which Moroni presumably sealed with some kind of an outer band and perhaps with some kind of official imprint. Nephi's words drew on Isaiah 29 and spoke of the man who says, "I cannot read a sealed book," indicating probably that he lacked the authority to break the seals and open that sealed bundle, as you can now visualize. By the way, another passage that we can now think of as a doubled sealed document is in Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 10. It has never before been identified as a double document as far as I know of. It reads, quote, "And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent to me, and lo, a roll of a book was in the hand. And he spread it before me, and it was written within and without, filled with lamentations, mourning, and woe." Since a double document would have been especially appropriate for an official decree from the assembly in heaven, doesn't that understanding make the best sense of the otherwise puzzling description of what Ezekiel saw, a text that was written within and without? And finally, number 12, we have a sealed portion that was to be used in judgment to verify something. We don't know what the relationship between the open or abridged portion of the Book of Mormon is and the sealed portion that we don't yet have. But it seems clear that the sealed portion is intended to serve some kind of verification function. In Moroni 10, we have Moroni's testimony. He testifies that what he has written is true. He tells us that his record will be used in court in the final judgment when we will see him at the judgment bar of God. There we know that books will be opened, and there will be something about that that will confirm the testimony of Moroni. As he says, "And ye shall know that I lie not." Could it be that opening the seals will give us the backup copies that will verify that what we have in the Book of Mormon is true and accurate, indeed the most correct book on earth? And thus, for good measure, let me point out one bonus detail. Witnesses at the end always appeared at the end of these documents. Here you see the front side of the last page of the first edition of the Book of Mormon. It was there at the end of the book that the 3 and the 8 witnesses left their testimony of the truthfulness of this book. Well, last of all, let me approach these plates by suggesting just a few ways in which we might learn other things from these plates, not only as Roman historians, lawyers, or librarians, but in our personal lives as well. First, say all important things twice. Twice said magnifies impact. In Job 33:14, Elihu, describing the ways of the Lord, says to Job, "For God speaketh once, yea, twice." Even God repeats himself, and yet man still does not understand. I've long used this verse in Job to explain the, to us, redundancy of parallelism and chiasm, but I now see it as applying also to doubled authoritative decrees, and also to our modes of speech still today. Second, Write what you mean, and mean what you write. We can well admire and strive to emulate the care and effort that it took to write and produce these imperial bronze plates. We would do well to take similar pains in documenting our own lives and dealings with our fellow men. 3. Say things once and for all, or better, twice and for all. Even better than set in stone, the words on these bronze plates were cast in brass. In a modern world where we readily rescind legislation, easily overturn judicial precedents, opportunistically amend corporate charters or personal agreements, we could learn something about the benefits of sticking by our word and diligently keeping our covenants. 4th, use witnesses more often. Modern business practices use witnesses too rarely. Think of the number of arguments, disputes, and lawsuits that could be avoided if more care was taken to adopt those agreements over the signatures of 3 or 7 witnesses. There are reasons for the ancient law of witnesses. 5th, write on valuable and durable pages. Don't forget that the medium is much of the message. People value legal documents partly because they've paid a lot for them. Our precious words of love and learning deserve to be enshrined in beautiful renditions that will endure to the end. 6th, appreciate the skill and hard work and sacrifices that have gone into making the world beautiful and stable around you. Plates like these don't just happen by chance. Neither do other things that we almost every day take for granted, like our citizenship, our heritage, and our scriptures. And finally, 7, keep your eyes open and treasure the not-so-coincidental information or encounters that God brings into your life. After all we can do, plates like these don't come to Provo, Utah by chance, and neither have you. I admire the ancients. I have enjoyed living closely with these plates for the last year and a half. I am grateful to the Lord that we have them. I know that the Book of Mormon is true. These plates have made that truthfulness even more palpable than ever for me. I hope you will enjoy making them and all that they symbolize and teach us, an unforgettable part of your life in the house of learning and the household of faith. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.